All right, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Magduit and we're back again with another video. Today we're going over a new rack, and this rack is my very first Phat rack. And to make this rack, I did a lot of research and reconnaissance trying to figure out like what is the point of a Phat rack, how do I make a Phat rack, what's good and what's bad and all that kind of stuff. And the two main racks that I really was inspired by when making this was the Virtual Riot Phat rack and the Eli Derp Phat rack. Both of them have really cool stuff built into it. Highly recommend checking them out. If you've never heard of those people, you should look up their Patreons or their YouTube. There's a lot of insightful stuff that they have. The big thing about the Virtual Riot Phat rack that I liked was the timbre was kind of cool, but I didn't like how there wasn't as much control as I would want. And then the Eli Derp Phat rack has a ton of third-party VST stuff, which I think is limiting at times, and also I felt wasn't entirely necessary. Some of it is, but some of it wasn't, and I was able to achieve very similar effects without any third-party VST stuff. So let's go over this Phat rack. So the first knob that we have here is the Phat knob. It's a pretty classic knob, and it just makes things fatter, brings out good frequencies, tries to get rid of any bad frequencies, makes things louder, all that kind of good stuff, multi-band compresses. I'm a really big fan of it. So yeah, it's a little sensitive, so just be aware of that. Usually what I will do is I'll bring it up until it's a little bit further than where I'd like it, and then I'll usually bring it back a little bit. So yeah, that's just something that I recommend. When it comes to the Phat rack as well, like I said, this is so sensitive that if you push it really hard, it can be pretty aggressive. But the idea there was if I have more than enough, that's good. But if I don't have enough, then that's bad. So I wanted to be able to push it harder than I want in situations where you may want to do that. Not always, but yeah, something to keep in mind. So the next knob is the focus knob. And the idea here is that it's going to remove some reverberant feeling from the sound. It's going to kind of narrow it a little bit, maybe just do a little bit more EQing, trying to make it a little bit more just direct and forward. And yeah, I love this knob. I use it a lot. I'm pretty aggressive with it as well. So yeah, explore what you think is best with it, but I love this knob. So the next knob is the distortion knob. So distortion is always great, especially on a sound that's not quite aggressive enough. And I feel like this one gets the job done in a really pleasing way. One thing I wanted to note is that this distortion knob has two stages. The first half of the knob is a single stage, so it's like kind of a softer, more subtle level of distortion. And then the second half is a more aggressive sort of distortion that's a little bit more obvious, a little bit more just like angry, which can be good for sounds that are like super smooth that you just want to like make just aggressive. So yeah, love this knob. The next knob is the color disperser knob. This is just taking a rack that I put out a few weeks ago called the color disperser and putting it into this rack. I really loved the Eli Derp rack using the kilohertz disperser, but I wanted to keep it stock, and I felt like my disperser sounded really good for what it was doing. And yeah, I think that in this rack it does the same. I think it does a great job at creating that dispersed feeling while also keeping things unique timbrally, as it doesn't sound the same as the kilohertz disperser, but I think you'll find it sounds just as good, if not better, in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's what that knob does. The next knob is the push knob, and I hope that it's sort of obvious, but I just want to make this clear. I've kind of tried to color code everything, and once you get down to this section here, my thought process is, okay, you've kind of shaped the timbre of the sound in the way that you want with these knobs. Now you're focusing more on gain staging and mixing of the sound. So the push knob is basically not going to change a lot of the volume. I'm sorry, the timbre of the sound, but it is going to change the volume and try and bring it up in the mix if it is something that you want to be a little bit louder, but like not change too much of the timbre. And in Eli Derp's rack, he has this, but he's using M saturator. I found that the stock Ableton saturator still just sounded really good. So yeah, I just switched it over to that. And yeah, it has a limit of 12 dB. From my experience, what I've found is that up until around 8 dB, it's pretty seamless. Like there's no timbral changes, but then as soon as you start pushing that, you'll start to notice there's a slight bit of distortion. Usually it's pleasurable, but it's one of those things where just be aware of the fact that up until around 8 dB, it's pretty transparent, and then things get a little bit more tonal and colored. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. So the next knob here is the Micro Soothe knob, and this is a pretty cool knob. I'm a big fan of it. So when I was using all these Phat racks, I noticed that almost immediately after using the Phat rack, I would reach for something else to kind of attenuate harsh frequencies. And I built these 2 racks probably like a few weeks ago that involved Micro Soothe and Micro Clarity. And the idea behind these 2 racks was the Soothe was to remove resonance peaks by having dynamic EQs with resonant peak removers, and then the Clarity is kind of the inverse of that, which has the dynamic resonant peaks being boosted. This knob allows you to remove those really harsh frequencies in a couple of different ways. It's a 3-stage knob, so the first stage is a very light amount of soothing, almost transparent, I would say. The second stage is like a medium soothe, where you essentially have a little bit more aggressive soothing, still kind of transparent, but it's noticeable if you A/B the rack. And then the third stage is just like heavy soothing, and you can really tell that it's going to be like removing harsher frequencies. And we'll get into this obviously once we start using it on this sample that I have here. But yeah, I found this knob to be super nice in the rack, just because a lot of the times when you're making stuff louder, there's a lot of like, I'll want the low end and low mids and mids to be a lot louder, but then there will be these like high frequency or high mid frequency sounds that are just like ruining the vibe. So I just put this knob in there so that way you can just not even have to reach for anything. You don't need any third-party VSTs. You don't need soothe or anything like that. You just pull this knob up and you start to remove some of that harshness. So yeah, that's why that's there. The OTT time is just a global OTT time adjuster. The idea here is if you want your OTTs in the rack to add more I guess artifacts, you would drag it to the left, make it a little bit lower. And then if you want it to be a little bit more transparent and have less artifacts, you could drag it to the right, make those attack and release times a little bit longer, a little bit more transparent. And then last but not least, we have a high pass filter. This is just good if you want to make something loud, but you don't want all the low end to be like there. And it's maybe a bass or a mid bass or something like that. You know, you can just be like, all right, I don't want the low end in this because I already have a dedicated sub, or I already have sub elements in my track. I don't need the low end. Let me just high pass it. So that's why that's all there. So yeah, that's the whole rack. I did want to just quickly go over the fact that on this rack, there's a lot of helpful tooltip information that I think will make it easier to use. All you have to do is hover over the respective either knob or even the global name of it. And you can see over here, it will tell you like Phat makes the sound fatter, focus makes the sound tighter and more centered, removes reverb, you know, and it'll tell you what everything does. And then if you hover over the individual knobs, there's even another level of information and like opinions that I have about the knob that will hopefully help you kind of achieve the goals that you're hoping to achieve with this rack. So that is the whole rack. Now let's go into the utility of it and let's start using it. So I have this bass here, and I'm just gonna turn this off, make sure, I mean, all this is dry as is, but I just like to make sure that you all know this is what it sounds like. Pretty cool. And then we're gonna fatten it up. So let's see what happens if we make it fatter. Yeah, you can see like it's just so fun. I think it sounds really clean. It does the job well. I think it has like a lot of control, which sometimes people don't want, but I think that if you want to make really good music, having more control is better. Obviously, if you want to go in and change stuff even further, you can open up the rack and explore and just see what's going on. The resonant peak stuff can be adjusted. It's kind of confusing, but long story short, the frequency of the envelope is inside of these resonant followers. I'm sorry, the envelope frequency, here it is. So you can basically adjust both the envelope frequency and the frequency of this EQ respectively for each of these. There's 3 of them at the end here. You can see them. And the idea there is, like, if you don't like where the exact resonances are being removed, you can go in and adjust that. So just wanted to throw that out there and let you all know that you can do that. But yeah, that's my Phat rack. Hopefully this helps you guys make louder, better music. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. Definitely, like I said before, check out Eli Derp and Virtual Riot. I even did a little shout out to them here at the end in the high pass because, yeah, they really inspired me when it came to making this rack, and I definitely utilized some of their ideas, and I'm appreciative of them for coming up with some of these ideas. So, yeah, with all that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to keep making music. Peace.